Welcome back. You're listening to Untold Stories, exclusive dark historical horror from the Appalachian archives. Subscribe and ring the bell to keep the names from fading. Now let's begin with story. Rain crawled down the shingles of Clover Hollow as if it meant to stay. It soaked the rope at the church and slid along the oak leaves and stitched itself into the hem of the valley, until everything smelled like river and iron. Men walked bent against the weather. Boots dragged through coal-slick mud. The mine whistle moaned once, soft as a throat clearing, then kept its secrets to itself. Clara Reeves carried a folded length of lace to the window and frowned at the gray. "Not today," she said to the rain. The lace was her own, a veil she'd sewn with the neat, quiet care of a woman used to making beautiful things for other people. She'd stitched night after night by lamplight, fingers pricked in tiny constellations, blood sealed under milk-white thread. October 9th, Reverend Pike said. The vows under the oak, if the weather could be sweet for once. Her mother, Eliza, came from the stove with hands that never quite stopped moving, even when they rested. "You don't tell the sky what to do." She set a cup of chicory by the window and studied her daughter's face. She saw a brightness there and an ache trying not to show. "Thomas'll come after supper," Eliza said. "He sent a boy with word." Clara didn't answer. Her eyes kept sliding to the river as if it had spoken first. The general store had damp boards and a bell that rang like a cough. Ketteridge, the owner, counted scrip with a greedy mouth that never quite closed. He looked up when Thomas Ellerby stepped in. The foreman cut a pale shape in the room, as if he'd been sketched in charcoal and smudged around the edges. "You're late with the tallies," Ketteridge said. Thomas pulled a small ledger from his coat. "They're all there." He laid it down, then kept a hand on it. The knuckles trembled the way they always did after rain. "I'm to be married Sunday," he added, like a man remembering to say grace. "I heard." Ketteridge's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Lively said the lace is finer than store-bought." He tapped the ledger, and the tapping sounded like someone pacing upstairs. "You'll want to keep good accounts if you mean to keep a wife." Thomas nodded once. "I mean to keep her." The words were plain. But as he spoke, his fingers tightened a fraction, as though tightening on a thought he wouldn't let breathe. That evening, Clara walked the path behind the church where the oak spread its arms. The ground there was soft, fed by the river's slow seep. Children had braided ribbons in the lower branches and left them, so that when the wind moved they danced by themselves, wedding guests practicing. And there, at the root that wrapped like a sleeping animal, she saw a shape that didn't belong, an envelope pinned beneath a small stone. Her name written across the face in a hand she knew better than her own breath. "Who?" She whispered. No one answered. "Just the river, drinking." She slid the letter free. The paper was damp and cold, but the ink held, black as fresh coal. "Do not let him take you to the water." Not again. It must not happen again. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. The slant of the letters. The way the R in Reeves turned back on itself in a shy hook. It was her writing. Clara stood very still. She listened for children laughing, for Mrs. Lively's cluck, for the shuffle of a boot, anything that would put the world back on its right foot. But the wind had gone to ground, and the river leaned in to hear the silence she was making. "Not again," she read aloud. And the phrase curdled the air. She put the envelope in her pocket and pressed her hand flat against it. As if that could keep whatever it meant from escaping, Thomas arrived at the Reeves house after supper. Wet to the elbows, as if the rain had been inside his sleeves. Eliza opened the door, wiped her hands, and stepped aside with a weary kindness. "I'll make coffee." Clara stood by the hearth and waited. When Thomas came to her, he looked different. Eyes bruised with lack of sleep. A smile too late to his mouth. "They'll let out the early shift Sunday," he said. "Reverend expects us under that tree come afternoon." He glanced at her veil, hanging near the window like a captured cloud. "You've done fine work, did I?" she asked before she could help herself. "Or did I only copy what I've already made?" Thomas blinked. "What's that mean?" She could have told him about the letter, about her name in her own hand warning her against him, the water. But the house was listening. The rain had ears. She folded her hands instead and said, "I mean thank you." He studied her, searching for a crack in the mask. He had a way of looking that made you think of the mine, the dark pressing in, the walls sweating secrets. "You been near the river?" he asked. "Everyone's near the river," she said. "We live inside it." He reached for her hand then, and the warmth of it shocked her. A human thing. A good, ordinary thing that should have been a rope tying her to sense. And yet, beneath that heat, she felt his fingers tremble. A small tremor, a fault line. She pulled away gently. "I'll see you Sunday." Thomas nodded, but it looked like surrender. On his way out he paused at the door and spoke to the weather. "No more water," he said, so low it seemed the words weren't ready to be born. "Not again." Eliza looked up. "What?" "Nothing," he said and left. Night walked through Clover Hollow and hung its coat on the steeple. The church bell was a dead weight in the dark. Rope cut years back, rust gnawing the iron. No one touched it anymore. It had its own notions of when to speak. That night, close to midnight, it rang once, clean and thin, like a needle finding skin. Clara sat up straight in bed. Eliza slept on, lips moving with a prayer half dreamed. The house smelled faintly of river reeds, as if someone had opened a door that did not exist. Clara slid her feet to the floor, shivering. By the window, the veil stirred though no breeze came. She went to it, swayed by something she didn't want to name, and pressed her face into the lace. "Not again," she breathed. From the yard, a footstep answered that. She froze. Then another soft, careful. A man trying not to be a man. Clara moved to the door, heartbeat plucking at her throat. She opened it a hair's width. The yard was a bruise. The rain had stopped, but the drops lingering on the fence gleamed like eyes. Something moved by the oak, not shadow, not flesh. A white blush, then nothing. "Thomas?" She called, but that was habit, not belief. There was no reply. Only the slow, patient sound of water, and the veil at her shoulder, lifting and falling like breathing. A hook set in the dark. And she knew it would not come free. Quiet line. The bell had rung once. And the valley had heard. Sunday began with sunlight, a false smile. Boys ran the muddy road, cracking willow switches. Women steadied pies. Reverend Pike fed his horse and hummed a hymn to convince himself. A wedding day, after all. A day for hoping. Clara wore her mother's blue sash beneath the white. The secret something old that made her feel like she had a rope tied to the past. Eliza clasped her hands and kissed her forehead. "You're my brave girl," she murmured, voice caught on a thorn. The oak waited. Ribbons trembled. A few men from the mine gathered near the back, faces more suited to funerals, scrip folded in their pockets like a promise you'd never be allowed to keep. Ketteridge stood nearest the pies. Mrs. Lively wiped at her eyes like she was already remembering. Thomas was late. 15 minutes. 30. Reverend Pike cleared his throat and told a story about patience. He kept glancing at the river, as if at any moment a boat would cut the bend and deliver a groom upright as a package. At last, breathless as if chased, Thomas appeared. Coat clinging. Hair slicked down with water that had the wrong smell, the deep cold of a place that never sees daylight. "Forgive me," he said, not looking at Clara. There was work. "At the mine on a Sunday?" Ketteridge said, too loud. Thomas didn't answer. He took his place. His hands were steady now. It unsettled Clara more than the trembling had. Reverend Pike opened his book. "Dearly beloved," the bell rang. 2 notes, spaced like a pair of footsteps, the second slightly behind the first. Heads turned. No rope, no man up there. Just the lever of rust and sound unfurling like a flag. The Reverend tried to talk over it. "We are gathered," another note. Then quiet, Doc Pike faltered, recovered, and hurried the words as if the faster he spoke, the less meaning they'd carry. "To join this man and this woman." He reached the part where he asked the question, and the question stuck. Clara said, "I do," because she loved the sound of it, the way the shape of the words fit her mouth. Thomas waited a beat too long. From the river came a splash. Not heavy. Not a body. Like a hand lifting out of water and touching it again. Eliza pressed a fist to her lips. Mrs. Lively closed her eyes. Thomas laughed. A single bark, almost a cough. "I do," he said quickly, like he'd just remembered his line. They were married. Applause touched them and slid off. The Reverend prayed so fast he outran the amen. The pies were cut without tasting. Guests moved like people in a painting the painter had stopped loving. One of the miners, a man named Archer with a boy living in his pocket, touched Thomas's sleeve. "Water on your coat," he said softly. "River on a Sunday." "Must have brushed a branch," Thomas snapped. "Mind your own." Clara took his arm. The day turned. The shadows thickened strange. "Walk me," she said. "Just a little. I feel lightheaded." They took the path behind the church, into the hush where the oak shade lived. Birds trilled like a conversation someone had cut into pieces. Clara stopped at the root where the letter had lain and looked down, expecting to see the damp scar on the soil. The ground had forgotten, as easily as people do. She pulled the envelope from her pocket and placed it in Thomas's hand. He stared. He didn't open it. "What's this?" "Read it." He did. She watched the words pass over his eyes like clouds, and watched the way his mouth made a shape that wasn't surprise, or shock, or any honest thing. It was the shape of a lie deciding which face to wear. "Someone's unkind," he said. "Someone meant to frighten you. It's my handwriting." He shook his head. "It only looks like it." "Do not let him take you to the water," she said. "Not again." "Who would say such?" "Me," Clara said. "I said it, and I don't remember saying it. I found it here. Before you came late. Before the river spoke." He folded the letter. His fingers were very calm. "You're tired. That's not an answer." He looked at her then with a hardness she had not met before, and she saw something inside him, a door with many bolts. He had locked it a long time ago. He had thrown the keys into water. "We're married," he said, voice almost gentle. "What matters is that?" It was the gentleness that frightened her. "Walk me home," she said, and he did. And his hand on her arm was the weight of a promise she did not understand. Night put out the lamps one by one. The house settled around Clara and did not sleep. Thomas had insisted they spend the first night at the Reeves house, proper and respectable. Eliza had watched him with a look that promised nothing. He lay on the parlor settee, boots under the chair, eyes open in the dark until they weren't. Clara dreamed the letter wrote itself. She dreamed her hand moving, neat as ever, and the pen refusing to lift, as if the paper were the deeper thing, and the words had to be excavated. She woke to a sound like a bucket drawn from a deep well. Water slipping. A soft, wet dragging. The front door was ajar, a slice of cold cut into the heat. The veil on the chair had fallen to the floor and lay half in, half out of the moonlight, tail of some small animal too tired to find its hole. She rose. "Thomas?" she whispered, and she didn't need the answer to know he wasn't in the parlor. The river path accepted her bare feet without complaint. The night had the kind of quiet that keeps its thumb on your throat. She followed a gleam between the trees, steady, like a lantern carried by someone who knows how to keep flame from going wild. At the bend she stopped. Two figures by the water. One was Thomas, coat off, shirt sleeves rolled, the skin of his arms ghost pale. The other was a woman in white, the dress floating around her like milk poured into a dark bowl. She stood ankle deep. Her hair lay along the surface without making a ripple. She lifted her head and looked at Clara the way a calm animal looks without blinking. "With acceptance of what it is, Clara," Thomas said, not turning. He sounded oddly relieved. "You're awake." The woman in the water smiled. It was like watching a painting be kind. "Who are you?" Clara whispered. She knew who, and she couldn't say the name, or the name would ask more of her. "Mary Ellen," the woman said, in a voice as clean as wind. "From Harrow's Mill. Do you remember, Thomas? Do you remember the way the ledgers add up?" Thomas flinched. "Don't," he said. Clara stepped closer. Her feet barely felt the ground. "You're not alive, not the way you mean." Mary Ellen lifted a hand and the water lifted with it, a thin veil that kept its shape a moment longer than it should. "But we keep what we are. We keep our names." Thomas grabbed Clara's arm, hard. "Come away," he said, and the grip hurt. And the hurt woke the anger that had been sleeping in her. She yanked back. "Don't," she said. Mary Ellen watched them as a teacher watches children struggle with a lesson. "He brought me," she told Clara. "He brought others. He writes it down." "Stop," Thomas whispered. "Take into the water," Mary Ellen said. And the phrase made the water lap the bank with a soft laugh. Every name with the same end. Clara stared at Thomas. "Say it isn't true." He closed his eyes. He breathed once, shallow. "We needed," he began, and failed. "I thought the river." "You thought it would keep you," Mary Ellen said, not unkind. "But the river keeps its own. And we speak when we're ready." The oak behind them, unseen, creaked. The night pressed in. Clara felt the shape of her life tilt. "Go home," Mary Ellen told her gently. "You don't have to stand in the water tonight." Clara nodded before she knew she would. She backed away. Thomas reached for her and missed and didn't try again. The path lifted under her feet and gave her back to the house, to Eliza's small lamp just lit, to a mother's face trying to be a map. "What did you see?" Eliza asked. "Tomorrow," Clara said. "I'll tell you tomorrow." She did not sleep. She sat by the window, watching the veil breathe, somewhere between first and second light. The church bell rang twice, close together, like a door opening and a door closing. On the seventh night after, the town would learn what the bell meant. Quiet line. The river had practiced her name. And now it knew it. Morning found Thomas at the mine mouth, eyes raw. The men avoided him with the cautious distance of those who sense an open flame. Archer, the miner with the boy, spat to one side. "You look like you've been praying," he said. Thomas didn't rise. "I've been sleepless." "Same thing," Archer said. Down in the seam, the air turned the color of a bruise. Picks rang. Carts screamed. Thomas carried a small leather ledger in his inside pocket. It warmed to his body as if alive. He touched it sometimes like a man touches a talisman or a wound. At noon he sat alone, opened it, and ran a finger down names that did not belong to him. Mary Ellen Cover Harrow's Mill taken to the water. June Baxter Wexley taken to the water. And at the bottom, written neater than the rest, as if he had tried to be kinder with the pen, Clara Reeves, Clover Hollow returned. He stared at the last word until it lost shape. He had written it yesterday, just after the vows, in a cramped back room of the store while Ketteridge counted coin. Some part of him had moved his hand without permission and given away. The truth he would not speak, returned, as if the river had decided to keep her voice for future use. At quitting. He climbed to the surface like a man surfacing too late. The day outside the mine had a sharpness that made the edges of things clear, the oak a black stitch against the sky, the church a card leaning wrong. He thought of going to Clara. He thought of kneeling at her feet with the ledger and opening it to the page with her name and saying, "Here, look, this is the worst of me. This is the map of my harm. And if you throw it in the fire, I will be thankful for the burn." He imagined her face. What he saw there frightened him more than any river. He went to the boarding house instead, to his small room that smelled of old soap and walls. He locked the door. He laid the ledger on the table and pulled a second book from beneath the bed. A little thing, bound in black cloth that had belonged to a different man. Inside, in a hand tight and mean, were numbers and names and notes about the river and what it would take. He had found it when he first came to Clover Hollow, in a trunk left by a prior foreman who'd moved on. Men always move on. The water stays. The first pages were older 1898. Elijah North had kept them. The entries had the dry hunger of a man counting not coin but favor. 3 to the water. The scene held 2 months. 1 more before frost. After 1902, Elijah's hand vanished. A new script began Thomas's. He turned to the back. A scrap of lace was pinned there, not Clara's. The tiny stitches glittered. He thought of Mary Ellen's hair, floating obedient. "We needed," he had tried to say. Needed what? The mind to behave. The ridge not to bury men. The way a valley will sometimes chew and swallow everything you love and leave you hungry in the bones. A bargain made by someone long dead, kept by those who inherit the ledger like a title. He lit a match, touched it to the old pages. Flame walked the edges and folded inward, blue at first, then greedy orange. The room filled with a sweet, ugly smell. He blew it out too fast, panicked. The book sizzled, pages scabbed black. He beat the smoke with a towel, coughing, laughing, choking, something like joy and self-hatred and relief knotted together. He watched the burned mouth gnaw a hole through names until it reached Clara Reeves and stopped. As if some part of the ledger had teeth of its own, he put the book away. Then he took it back out. Put it away again. The door knocked, soft. "Mr. Ellerby?" "Mrs. Dunn from down the hall. Telegram for you." He opened to her. She handed the folded yellow with a look like pity dressed as politeness. He read, from Harrow's Mill Constable regarding Mary Ellen Carver. "Stop, you are requested for questioning and disappearance. Stop, do not leave town." He refolded the paper. The room tilted. He smiled without humor. "Town's got me," he said. Clara told Eliza about the river. Not everything, not the exact shape of the woman's smile, not the word taken the way it knocked in the chest, but enough. Eliza took her hands in both of her own and spread warmth through the cold like a small stove. "You'll go to the Reverend," she said. "And then to Sheriff Blay. We'll do it proper." Clara said, "Proper is what married me." They went anyway. Reverend Pike looked smaller in daylight, as if without the shadow of the steeple his authority had nowhere to sit. He listened, eyes flicking to the door as if he expected the bell to come in and sit beside them. When Clara finished, he folded his hands and spoke carefully, as if navigating a floor full of thin glass. "The devil keeps many disguises. Water is one. The river is not the devil," Clara said. "It's a river." Pike smiled, glad to have a scripture he could find. "All rivers lead somewhere." "Speak plain," Eliza said. "Do you know about any bargain? Any sin of men that makes this town feel like a held breath?" Pike's smile died. He looked at his empty palms. "The mine is hard," he said finally. "Hard men do what hard seasons ask." His voice softened. "Child, if you hear the dead, do not answer. That's my counsel." She wasn't asking, Clara said. She was telling. Pike rose. He looked older. "Then take this to the sheriff." Sheriff Blay had the build of a man who had once lifted heavy things for a living, and now lifted paper for pretended peace. He heard them out. He wrote nothing. When he asked to see the letter, Clara placed it on his desk. He held it at arm's length as if it smelled. "You wrote this?" He asked. "It's my hand," she said. "But not your mind," he said. And the fact that he believed her did not feel like relief. He called for Deputy Sills. "Fetch Ellerby," he said. "Kindly, until we need different." By the time Sills reached the boarding house, Thomas had gone. Not run, gone. His boots missing, his spare shirt, the black-bound ledger not where he'd left it. Sills swore under his breath. He checked the hall. Mrs. Dunn pointed toward the church path. "He took the way that listens," she said. S went a few steps and stopped. The river's sound pressed at his ear with the intimacy of a mother. He turned back. "Tomorrow," he told the sheriff. And they both pretended tomorrow was a real thing you could be sure of. That night, Eliza lit a candle and set it in the window. "For what we want to come home," she said. "Do we want him to?" Clara asked. Eliza's mouth twisted. "We want the truth. If he delivers it, he can stand in the yard to hear what I say next." Clara laughed despite herself, grateful for the thin thread of anger that felt like hers. She went to the bedroom. The veil lay where she had left it. She lifted it, let it pool through her fingers, and then pressed it to her face. A smell rose clean cold. Not the house. Not the hands that sewed it. River over stone. She dropped the cloth. It folded in on itself and made a shape that looked for one breath like a kneeling figure. Clara stepped back. Her heel struck the bedstead. The candle in the other room fluttered. The front door closed creaked as if opened by a polite ghost. "Who's there?" Eliza called. A voice answered, soft, the shape of a woman's breath. "It's me." The voice was not inside the house and not outside. It came from the places houses keep between boards. "Eliza," it said, and Eliza's knees buckled. "You do not hear your own name said in the voice of a stranger and stay whole." "It's Clara," the voice added, and in that instant Eliza had the time to think wildly. Absurdly, but she is here, and hand went to heart. And then the voice continued with a sorrow that knew its work. "Clara Reeves, Mrs. Lively, Mary Ellen, all our names. Go together if you know where to look." "Where?" Eliza whispered. "In the book you burn," the voice said. "In the ledger you hide." Eliza gathered herself. "I'll fetch the sheriff," she said, and the voice sighed with an old patience. "You'll fetch the same men who threw our names to water." Clara stepped into the parlor. The candle flame leaned toward her as if smelling. "Mary Ellen," she said. "Are you alone?" "We are never alone," the voice said, and the candle went gently out, as if pinched between two fingers that belonged to no one you could find. Quiet line. The proof was there. But proof in Clover Hollow had ash in it. Thomas slept in fits at the church vestibule with his back against the door, like a man trying to keep something in. He dreamed of stair-stone ones that descended beneath the church to where the foundation sat in wet earth. He dreamed he walked down with the ledger, and each step had a name carved into it, worn smooth by feet that had never climbed back up. Mary Ellen waited at the bottom, hair dark as a shuttered room, and she was patient. Patience is the revenge of the dead. He woke to the small sound of someone standing there. Reverend Pike, face bloodless. "The sheriff wants you," he said. Thomas rose, joints complaining. "Does the sheriff want to stand at the river with me?" Pike swallowed. He was not built for standing with anyone and anywhere the ground is honest. "He wants to ask about a girl in Harrow's Mill." Thomas nodded. "We can ask the river," he said, and pushed past. They found Blay on the path, hat off, hair flattened by weather and worry. Clara stood to one side of the oak, Eliza behind her, a hand at her elbow. Sills came from the direction of the boarding house, empty-handed. Ketteridge hovered near enough to count, far enough to deny. Mrs. Lively arrived, small and stubborn as a nail in old wood. "What did you do, son?" Blay asked. Thomas blinked at the word son. He was 30 and felt older. "I kept things from breaking," he said. "The mine. The men. The ridge. I kept the tally even. At the cost of girls, Eliza said, voice blade thin. Thomas looked at Clara. Something like apology crossed his face. A shadow of it. A draft from a door far away. I began with names from before me, he said. Elijah started it. The mind kept its temper if some other thing got fed. I took it as a rule I did not write. But then rules make cowards of us all. His voice failed, came back. Then I chose. He looked down at his hands like two animals he did not entirely trust. Then I thought the river might keep Clara's voice and give me the rest of her. Clara's face went still. You brought me to the water. I led you near, he said. But you did not step in. I would have, she said, and that was the worst of it. The truth is a sweetness that kills slower than a lie. I would have if Mary Ellen had not stood there. Mrs. Lively stepped forward. Bring the book, she said to Thomas. Bring the record of your harm. Thomas lifted his chin. It's burned. Not all of it, said another voice, a man's. Courthoused and slick. Ketteridge. He had the look of someone who enjoys lifting lids. He produced from somewhere inside his coat a second ledger older, mended with twine weather stiff. Some debts I keep for my own purposes, he said. Foremen come and go. Accounts remain. Thomas stared at the book as if it had stolen his name. I only ask the numbers to behave, Ketteridge said. If a river wants what a river wants. You profited, Eliza said. Ketteridge's mouth shaped a denial and landed on a grin instead. We all live on what the earth gives us, he said. And what we give the earth to keep it giving. He held the ledger out to Blay. The sheriff took it with a reluctance that read as shame. Mrs. Lively stepped close, peered at the pages. There, she said, finger on an entry. Mary Ellen, Harrow's Mill, June, Wexley. 3 more from Bardo in a winter with no thaw. She looked up at Thomas. Did you pick them? Sometimes the river picked, Thomas said, desperate for even a sliver of absolution. Sometimes it spoke. The river speaks with your voice, Clara said. Not anymore, Mary Ellen said. From the water. They turned as one. She stood as before, ankle deep. The hem of her white gown making the small border between what breathes and what doesn't. The air cooled a hand's breadth. Sheriff Blay made a sound he would later claim not to have made. Lady, Mrs. Lively said, because old women keep manners near for times like this. What would you have us do? Mary Ellen tilted her head. Write different, she said simply. If this book gave us to the water, then a book can take us back. She smiled a little, as if at a child's cleverness. Not our breathing. But our names, how? Pike whispered, as if a liturgy might be offered to fill this gap. Open it, Mary Ellen said to Clara. Say what's true. Clara took the ledger from Blay. Its weight surprised her. A promise feels heavy because it carries what it will cost. She turned the pages. Her fingers shook, and she steadied them by remembering the hours she'd taught them to be still with needle and thread. The names watched her from the paper. She found Mary Ellen's lying. The notation in the margin, taken to the water. The numbers, cruel and calm. She struck the words with a single line and wrote above, given back her voice. Then she said it aloud, voice low, words laid on the river like coins on a closed lid. Mary Ellen Carver. Given back her voice. The water breathed. The surface tightened, then loosened like a chest that had been braced against pain. Mary Ellen closed her eyes and smiled. Clara wrote again. June Baxter. Given back her voice. The river's edge shivered. A second pale shape appeared beside Mary Ellen for one breath, then was gone like a face in glass when a lamp is moved. Ketteridge laughed, a short, sharp break in the air. Girl, he said, ink is nothing. Men are something. The mind will eat you no matter what you write. Clara did not look up. She wrote faster, the names gathering like rain. Barto's girls. Given back their voices. Each time the river acknowledged the saying with a small specific movement, a ring, a sigh. A thread of ripple crossing another line and making a pattern you could follow. If you wanted to know where it led. Thomas stepped forward. "Clara," he said, and put a hand on the page, gentle. The ledger grew very quiet under his palm. "Save me," he whispered. She waited. She listened to the river, to the oak, to the sore, tender scrape of her own breath. She took his hand and moved it away. "I can't write you," she said. "You're not lost the way they are." He swallowed. The tendons at his throat lifted like ropes pulled too hard. "Then I'm lost a different way." She closed the ledger. "That's yours to fix." He stared a moment longer, then turned to the river. Men always want absolution from something too large to say no. He stepped into the water. "Thomas," Eliza warned. He kept going. Ankle, shin, knee. The current found the hollows of him like a learned touch. He lifted his chin. "I have given names," he said, voice fierce and almost beautiful. "I have kept a ledger that took. I return it. I return me." Mary Ellen regarded him with thoughtful sadness. "We are not hungry for you," she said. "We don't eat. We carry." Thomas laughed softly. "Then carry me where the numbers stop." He went deeper. The water clasped his waist like a belt. Clara moved without choosing to. The ledger thumped against her chest. The river's sound rose, a hush turning human. She stepped to the bank and stopped with her toes at the edge like a girl measuring. "Thomas," she said, "do not do this to me. Not like this." He looked back over his shoulder, and for a second she saw the man he had been before ledgers, before bargains, the boy from a different hollow who'd come to a new valley hoping to outrun himself. "I'm sorry," he said, and then the river pulled. It was not dramatic. No thrashing. No cry. A step that found no ground. A hand that reached for the air as if there were a rung there, and then wasn't. Water closed soft as a vow. Sheriff Blay swore. Sills ran along the bank like running had a meaning. Eliza pulled Clara back from the edge. Pike prayed, finally, like a man who'd just remembered he owned a voice. The surface smoothed itself and lay, like a fresh sheet. Mary Ellen did not move for a long time. Then she looked at Clara. "This is not the end," she said. Clara held the ledger tighter. "What else do you want me to write?" Mary Ellen's smile went away. "Nothing," she said. "Words brought us here. Let the wrong ones burn." She lifted a hand and the river pulled a small shape from the silt-a-charb of black-bound cloth, singed at the edge, the ruin of Thomas's first book. It drifted to the bank and stuck there like a dead leaf. "Throw the rest to flame," Mary Ellen said. "Then listen." "Listen to what?" Eliza asked. "To what keeps speaking after," Mary Ellen said. "Not to punish. To remember." The water lapped once, assent. Then the woman turned and walked deeper, and deeper did not change her. At some distance she was only a pale kernel, then a guess. Then a story told by water moving where it didn't have to. Quiet line. The river had confessed. But confession is only the first stone shifting. They burned the ledgers that night in the church stove. Pike lit them with a steady hand and watched as if penance could be seen if you looked with the right part of your eyes. The smoke went up the flue and out into the October, and people standing in the yard said the smell was sweet and wrong. Like a hymn sung off-key by someone you loved, Ketteridge protested. That is the kind of man he was. He stamped and shouted about accounts and contracts and property until Sheriff Blay put a hand flat on his chest and said, "Enough." The owner fell back a step, and in falling he felt new and unwelcome, the edge of fear. Not of the river. Not of law. Fear of women standing together with a book on fire, and the long memory of a town in their hands. By first frost, Ketteridge would leave. He would pack at night, thinking secrecy his friend, But the women at the pump would see, and Mrs. Lively would nod once and carry on. Clara slept finally for a day and a night. Dreams came and went like weather. Eliza sat in a chair by the bed and mended for the sake of her hands. When Clara woke, she asked for water and did not flinch when it touched her mouth. This gave Eliza a quiet, mean joy she did not share. "You're still here," she said. "I am." Clara looked at the window, at the sliver of river you could see if you stood up and leaned just right. "I'll be here until I'm not," she added calmly, startling them both with the truth of it. Sheriff Blay came to the door with his hat off. He spoke gently, like a man stepping on a floor he knows is thin. "No charge," he said. "No blame on you, nor your mother. Folks will talk. There'll be quiet, too." Clara nodded. "If they talk, let them use our names proper." "I will," Blay said. He hesitated. "Constable from Harrow's Mill sent word. He says the river there's different now." "How?" "Calmer," Blay said, and felt foolish for the smallness of the word. After he left, Eliza put a plate in Clara's lap. "Eat," she said. "The living have chores." Clara ate 3 bites and set the plate aside. "I'm going out." "Eliza will go with you," Eliza said, surprising herself. A mother who stays behind loses a chance to teach the dark its manners. They walked to the river. The oak shrugged a few yellow leaves down like coins thrown to nobody. The water moved as if in a conversation with itself. On the bank, someone had left a ribbon from the wedding, pinned with a twig. The ribbon had faded in a day the way cloth does when it knows its lesson. "Mary Ellen," Clara said, not loud. "If you're listening, water is always listening. It's the people who forget." A shape rose, not a body more, like the suggestion of one. Eliza took Clara's hand and held tight, not out of fear, but pride, which is a cousin to fear and wears its face sometimes. "Thank you," Clara said to the river. It felt important to say it. Not because gratitude is deserved by what saves you, but because thanks opens a door in the chest you can walk through later when it gets hard again. The shape dwindled. Satisfied with the size of hearing, they stood a while. A train in the distance pronounced the syllables of farewell. Clara let go of Eliza's hand and bent to dip the edge of her veil in the water. When she lifted it, drops beaded and became small mirrors. In each one, for the space of a breath, her own face, and behind it other faces. A braid. "Keep them," Eliza said. And Clara did not wipe the veil dry. Years are a long habit. 1905 put itself on the shelf and made room for 1906, then 1907, then 1908. People left Clover Hollow as if the river had taught them how to move. The mind closed like a hand. The church leaned and then lay down. Children learned to spell new words in new places. Names like Mary, Ellen, and June opened doors in other towns when women heard them and nodded. A letter arrived sometimes, years apart. "We're well in Wexley. Our river sleeps. Harrow's Mill prays in a new building, and the bell there rings only when we pull the rope." Clara kept sewing. She made dresses for women who looked her in the eye and paid in coin when they could, in good bread when they could not. She laughed sometimes, and the laugh startled her less each season. She stood up for other girls when men grew large in rooms. She traveled to the small courthouse in Bardo once and sat with a shy witness while the constable asked questions politely and wrongly. She said, "Ask different," and he did, and the questions entered a place they hadn't known how to find. Eliza aged the way tough women do, suddenly and then not at all. Her hair went white, her shoulders squared. She kept the kettle going and the door unlocked and the window facing the river clean. She muttered when the weather broke things and blessed the sun when it behaved. On a cold October evening in 1908, a new family moved into the house across the way. A farmer with careful hands and a wife who wore her tiredness softly. A child who took to the yard like she'd been kept inside too long. The girl's name was Mary, and when she came to the fence she introduced herself to Clara with the solemnity of a judge. "I talk in my sleep," she reported. "I walk too. Mama says I'll go out the door one night if the door thinks I'm welcome." Clara smiled. "Our doors are polite," she said. "We'll latch them if we have to." That first week, Mary woke twice, once standing by the window, once at the back step, both times humming a tune she could not remember come morning. The second time, Clara heard the hum from her own room and rose and went to the yard. Mary stood barefoot on the path, eyes open to something only she could see. "What do you hear?" Clara asked. "The lady," Mary said absently. "She has a long dress and a crown that looks like sewing." Clara swallowed. Her veil hung in her closet. She had not worn it since the water. "What does she say?" Mary listened, head tilted, the way a bird listens. "She says, 'Keep your feet out of the deep,' she says. 'You don't have to go where they tell you,' she says. 'Our names go together like stitches.'" Clara breathed out a laugh that wasn't laughter. "That sounds like a smart lady." Mary nodded. "She says I should tell you that she wears her hair different now." Clara closed her eyes a second. The river's sound pulled a childhood memory loose, a little girl with wet braids sitting on a rock, counting the time between two church chimes. She opened her eyes. "All right," she said, as if agreeing to an appointment. "If she asks you to walk farther than the fence, you tell her, 'Not tonight,' will you?" Mary considered it. "I can try." "Try is the whole business," Eliza said from behind them, making them both jump. And we latched doors. When the flood came in late autumn, because mountains remember and water keeps score, it spilled past the bank, climbed the yard, and took the church. The oak held. It had grown around the bad years and the laughs and the ledger ash, and the ribbons and the prayers and the words said too late to unsay. The oak leaned but did not break. After the flood, the bell lay awkward in the grass like a big surprised animal. Men shouldered it to the ground by the church's grave and let it rest. Mrs. Lively pressed a palm to its cold side. "Hush," she told it. "You've said enough." The bell made no sound, but in the river a current turned and went its own way. As if in agreement, Clara and Eliza stood on the porch watching the water settle. In the field across the way, Mary ran in a circle and then stopped and looked toward the river as if answering an unheard roll call. She lifted a hand, serious as a promise, and waved once, small. Clara felt the answering lift in her arm, the old pull. She lowered her hand and gripped the porch rail instead. She said to Eliza, to the water, to herself, "I'll keep saying the names." Eliza squeezed her shoulder. "Until when?" "Until they don't need me," Clara said. And a slow, quiet sweetness, dangerous and necessary, filled her chest that night. The house creaked the way houses do after a flood, drying into their true shapes. The wind moved old smells around. The veil washed and hung stirred. Clara sat at the table and wrote a single sentence in a plain, sturdy book with a brown cover. She did not hide it. She did not pin lace inside. She wrote, "We remember by speaking, and we speak by choosing, and we choose to keep each other above the deep." She shut the book. She blew out the lamp. In the dark, the room settled. Across the yard, Mary began to hum the river's little song, and this time Clara recognized the tune. It was the few notes the church bell used to choose for itself. The notes you hear when you are called by name and by work and by love that does not look soft, but as Clara stood, went to the window, and watched the black ribbon of the river unroll. It did not feel like an enemy. It felt like a road that had stopped devouring and decided to lead elsewhere. "Thank you," she said again. Because thanks is a habit that keeps you from making ledgers you don't mean to. Somewhere far downstream, a woman laughed once, softly. Or else it was the sound of water hitting stone the way it likes to. Quiet line. We live with what we return, and what returns us keeps speaking after. Her vows were buried, But the river kept her voice.